Magic is one of those central ingredients that makes fantasy, well, fantasy. And because magic is magical, it can be whatever you want it to be. But when you world build, there are consequences to every choice you make. In this video, we're going to look at those core elements that comprise magic and fantasy. And when I say element, I'm not talking about earth, fire, water, and air. I mean what magic is, what it does, and who can use it. This is the first video on this topic. There's too much to say in just one. In a second video that I'll be posting in a week or two, we'll dig deeper into the nature of magic and the ramifications of those decisions you make on your wider world. So subscribe to make sure you don't miss that one. Hi, my name is Jonathan Oldenburg, author of the novel Tears from Iron. I have been world building 25 years now, including multiple passes on making magic a rich and wondrous element of my fantasy world. I'd like to share with you what I've learned along the way to help you do the same. Before we dive into the nature of magic, it's worth asking whether your world even needs magic at all. The short answer is no. While magic is common in fantasy, it isn't a necessary ingredient. A world becomes fantastical by having elements to it that cannot be found in our world, including non-human races, altered natural laws, weird geography, strange societal structures, and magic. But each of these are optional. That said, since you clicked on this video, I'm going to assume you want magic in your world. The real question then becomes why? What purpose does it serve for you as the creator? And for your audience as they engage with the world you've built? Because magic is cool is a perfectly valid starting point. It's where I began, but it's worth digging a little deeper. Considering it broadly, magic usually serves one of two roles. First, it can stand in for technology. Fantasy worlds are often set in a pre-industrial age, but sometimes you want fancier things that ancient or medieval societies were unable to achieve. Magic can offer this. Second, magic helps set the tone of your world. It can evoke awe and wonder, or fear and menace, or both. Some settings treat magic as neutral or even benevolent, while in others, such as the sword and sorcery subgenre, it is typically malevolent. Understanding whether magic is your world's tech, its mood setter, or both will help you decide what it is, how it interacts with reality, and how its inhabitants can tap into it. A key question in world building, one I bring up a lot, is whether an aspect is worldly or otherworldly. With magic, this distinction matters a great deal. By worldly, I mean magic that's part of the natural order. It plays by all the same rules as everything else. Laws, limits, cause and effect. Think of it as another branch of physics, right next to gravity, thermodynamics, and conservation of energy. It works within the natural system. For people living in such a world, magic might not feel magical at all. In the Dark Sword trilogy, for example, everyone has magic, and those without it are considered dead. The wonder, or more accurately, revulsion within the world isn't that magic exists, but rather that someone doesn't have it. But this is an extreme case. More commonly, worldly magic still inspires awe because it is wondrous for the audience, even if it isn't for the world's inhabitants, and/or because only a few select individuals can wield it. Brandon Sanderson is the modern poster child for worldly magic. He builds complex magical systems that integrate into the natural order of the worlds he creates. Otherworldly magic is the opposite. It comes from outside the natural order, from divinities, other planes, primordial forces, and so on. Instead of obeying the world's rules, it actively breaks them. It's usually not something you can discover through research and experimentation alone. It often requires faith, ritual, or divine favor, and it typically feels beyond the capacity of human understanding. Tolkien's Middle-earth functions this way. Frodo can't simply choose to be a wizard. Gandalf can wield magic because it's part of his created nature. Similarly, the magic of the elves is a part of their nature granted by Iluvatar. Dungeons & Dragons also has otherworldly magic, where clerics gain their powers from divinities they worship, and wizards channel extra-dimensional energy. Otherworldly magic has its own strengths and pitfalls that are typically the opposite of worldly magic. Because it comes from beyond, it is inherently wondrous, a huge plus. and it instantly captures the imagination in ways that no equation ever could. Of course, you can make it mathematical if you want, but it works better if this is hidden behind the curtain. The danger of otherworldly magic is inconsistency. In a game, it can break your rules system. In stories, it can cause wild power swings that strain credibility. Limitless creativity is wonderful, but if your limits shift from scene to scene, you may end up with inglorious nonsense. Whether magic in your world is part of the natural order or something otherworldly, it still needs a source. The possibilities are endless, but most systems fall into 4 broad categories: a natural force, a sentient being, a non-sentient external power, or the spellcaster himself. Placing the source within the natural order is a natural choice for worldly magic. It becomes another feature of nature, alongside the winds, the tides, the seasons, and so on. This makes it quantifiable, mathematical, and consistent. Even so, there's room for different flavors. One example is the Warren magic of Steven Erikson's Malazan series. Mages open warrens and use that outflowing of power for their purposes. Magic coming from a sentient being typically means divine power, granted to priests and clerics. Champions may find their powers increase, while those who offend their deity may be penalized with reduced magical capacity, its utter removal, or worse. This doesn't have to be divine, though. A dragon might serve as a source with its own moods and motives affecting what magic is available. In such systems, laws still exist, but they're more akin to traditions, expectations, or religious tenets, and these rules may change if the source is capricious or whimsical. When the source is a non-sentient, non-natural power, it may be harder to pin down because it's intentionally mysterious. Consider the original interpretation of the Force from Star Wars before later movies decided to make it scientific, and destroyed its wonderment. Fairy magic in folklore often works this way, from Santa Claus to the shoemaker's elves. The source exists outside the natural order, and its exact nature may not be understood. That being said, you as the world builder should know what it is, even if the peoples of your world and your audience never learn the truth. That will keep your system internally consistent. The 4th option is for magic to come from the spellcaster himself. The magic user harnesses his life energy, mental focus, etc. to achieve his purposes. Eastern monks are one inspiration here, while the sorcerers of Dungeons & Dragons provides another example. Another way to frame this topic is through the lens of external versus internal power. External sources, whether natural, divine, or mysterious, provide raw energy. Internal sources rely on the caster's own reserves. Many systems blend both. The Wheel of Time does this well. The source is an external, impersonal power, but wielding it requires intense skill and concentration. Failure can be deadly. In my own world of Isfalinus, magic is a natural force, the residue of creation, yet it still requires training, knowledge, and inborn talent. Understanding which of these sources powers your system will help you decide how magic behaves, how it's accessed, and how much wonder or danger it brings to your world. But who can use magic? In some worlds, the answer might be anyone, such as in RuneQuest, or in my setting of Isfalinus. It could be limited by race, such as elves yes, dwarves no. Or perhaps a select group within a population is born with the innate ability, such as the Aes Sedai of the Wheel of Time. This choice carries enormous implications. I'm going to save the big world-sweeping ones for the next video and focus just on what it means for magic here. For now, we face 2 questions: why and how much? If only certain individuals can use magic, why can't others? Is it genetic? Or perhaps something woven into the soul? I've got to tell you, nothing kills a sense of wonder faster than tossing around terms like DNA. But even if the cause is genetic, your world's inhabitants don't need to call it that. The Aes Sedai of the Wheel of Time may carry a special gene since their children are more likely to be able to channel, but they lack the vocabulary to explain it scientifically, so they interpret it through culture and myth instead. The same question applies if some races are magical and others aren't. What happened in its biology or its history to make that true? Whatever the reason, figuring this out will reveal a great deal about the species itself. And then there are worlds where everyone can use magic, at least theoretically. In Dungeons and Dragons and similar worlds, divine spellcasters gain their ability through faith and devotion. The greater hoi polloi won't have that ability because they've chosen other paths. In my world, everyone has some capacity, but it requires knowledge of the words of power, and a lot of practice. And those words tend to be hoarded by those who possess them. Now we face the second question: how much? Do all spellcasters have equal potential, or are some innately stronger? If there's variation, we're right back to asking why. In many RPGs, characters grow stronger because leveling is baked into the system. But that's just one model. In the Wheel of Time, the Ale Wise One, Cerelia, can barely light a candle with the source, while Nynaeve could incinerate the candle, the table, and the room it's sitting in, all while obnoxiously tugging on her braid. Most systems allow casters to grow stronger over time, but it's hardly a requirement. A world where magical ability never changes could be just as compelling. It's time to stop beating around the bush and talk about what magic actually is. I'm going to talk about this briefly because the options are nearly infinite. Fundamentally, we have to grapple with two big questions. What can magic do? And can everyone do everything with it? Many worlds divide magic into different branches, often called schools. These might be the classical elements of fire, water, wind, and earth. They might be functional categories like illusion, scrying, healing, and the ever-popular kaboom! In the Malazan series, magic flows through numerous warrens. Some are elemental, like fire and ice, but there's also darkness, shadow, and death. Tolkien doesn't have schools per se, but Gandalf shows an affinity for fire, perhaps because he bears the ring Narya, while Radagast's strengths lie with plants and animals. Saruman's talents lay with devices and what might be termed technology. For Isfalinus, I've chosen a hybrid of 8 affinities, half elemental and half not. Most sorcerers have one dominant alignment, but they can also manipulate those that sit adjacent to their own. As we draw near to the end of this first video, let's talk about morality and magic. Is it considered good, neutral, evil, or situation dependent? If everyone uses magic, chances are it's viewed as just another tool, and therefore is neutral. In the Darksword trilogy, magic isn't considered merely good, but life itself, while Sword and Sorcery portrays worlds where only Blackhearts would dare tread down the dark path of magic. Of course, these moral judgments can get complicated when outsiders enter the picture. This leads us to a critical question. Is magic's morality an objective truth of your world, or simply a societal belief that can evolve over time? If magic is immutably evil, then it can't just be a cultural taboo. There has to be a true consequence. The corruption of the soul, warping of the mind, something with real physical or metaphysical weight. Likewise, if magic is inherently good, it should be woven into the essence of life or consciousness, something foundational that elevates or even enables existence. But if magic is only viewed as good or bad due to current cultural mores, then ask yourself what historical events shaped that belief. Perhaps sorcerer lords waged wars that laid half the world waste, prompting hatred and revulsion. Or perhaps priestly healers quelled a devastating plague, earning themselves a devoted following. A perfect example of this is the Great Ones of Raymond Feist's Riftwar saga, who saved the world and earned themselves a place outside of their empire's laws. One key here is that different cultures can arrive at wildly different conclusions. One society's sacred art might be another's unforgivable apostasy. Choosing this option has important ramifications. The culture that sees magic as evil might be disarming itself, and therefore, given human proclivities, quickly subjugated or destroyed. For one society to cast aside magic while another retains it in a stable state, the anti-magic group must have something else that holds the pro-magic group at bay. Discipline, numbers, technology, or maybe the fact that magic in your world isn't powerful enough to tip the balance. Let's take one interpretation of dwarves and elves, for example. Dwarves are often interpreted as non-magical, while elves practically breathe magic. This disparity can work if dwarves have something else that levels the scales, such as uncanny toughness against magical attacks, or a genius for engineering war machines. Without something to counter the elven magic, the dwarves soon would become extinct. The key to all of this, and really the key to all world building, is to ask two questions every time you make a decision. Why is this so? And what are the ripple effects of this choice? This leads us to the next video, where I'm going to extend the ramifications of your magical choices, not just to that system itself, but to your entire world and the societies that inhabit it. So with that in mind, be sure to subscribe so you'll catch that video when it comes out. I anticipate I should get it posted in a week or two. If you enjoyed this content, please give it a like. Getting these videos out to more people is a real struggle, and that simple gesture could really help out with the algorithm. Another way to help out is to leave a comment. I'd love to hear what your favorite magical system is, or maybe what kinds of magic you don't care for. And with that, all that remains to say is goodbye, happy world building, and have a great day.